I was 70 years old, standing at the entrance of my own beach house in Santa Monica, the keys trembling in my hands. And then I heard it, Amanda's voice, sharp and cold, yelling from the terrace. "What is this old parasite doing here? There's no room for you, my mother-in-law." If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. That morning I had come early, expecting the house to be empty, just like always. But instead, I walked into a nightmare. My home was overrun by her family. My furniture looked ruined, my garden was torn apart. Let me take you back a little. That Friday, I drove to my beach house in Santa Monica, just like I had done hundreds of times over the past 20 years. The drive was second nature, the bends of the coastal highway, the salty air drifting through the window, the palm trees swaying against the bright blue sky. That house meant everything to me. Every brick, every tile, every single flower in the garden was paid for with money I earned after becoming a widow, sewing day and night as a seamstress. But the moment I turned into the driveway, I knew something was off. Cars I didn't recognize filled the garage. Loud music poured out across the property, so out of place in the quiet sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. My chest tightened, that instinct you get when something is terribly wrong. And then I saw it. My beautiful garden, the one I had cared for every weekend, was destroyed. Empty beer cans littered the lawn I always kept perfectly trimmed. Kids ran wild across the terrace, kicking a ball against my flower pots, smashing the red geraniums I had tended with love. My wicker chairs, the ones I had bought just last year, were draped with damp towels and dirty clothes. I walked toward the front door, my keys heavy in my hand, and there she was. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, standing in the doorway like she owned the place. She even wore my favorite apron, the one I embroidered myself 10 years ago. Her eyes were cold, that same look I had seen too many times before. "Amanda, I didn't know you were here," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm even as I looked at the chaos around me. "This is my house. I've come here every holiday weekend for the last 20 years. She laughed. Not a normal laugh. It was cruel, cutting, the kind of sound that makes you feel small. "Oh please," she scoffed. "Daniel told me we could use the house whenever we wanted. Besides, we're actually doing something useful here. You just come to whine and ruin our family plans." Before I could reply, more people crowded in behind her. Michelle, her sister, showed up with her 2 teenage boys. Their mother, with her bleached blonde hair, gave me a look of pure disdain. An older man in a Hawaiian shirt leaned against the doorframe. A young woman cradled a baby, while another man smoked casually on my porch. One by one, they all stared at me like I was the intruder. "So this is the famous mother-in-law you're always talking about?" Amanda's mother said, scanning me up and down. "I expected someone more impressive. She just seems ordinary." The laughter that followed cut deep. There I stood, 70 years old, in my simple travel clothes, mocked by strangers on the very property I built with my own hands and sacrifice. "Where is Daniel?" I asked, my heart pounding. My son needed to be here. He had to explain this madness. "Daniel's working as always," Amanda said with a smirk, crossing her arms. "Unlike you, he has real responsibilities." Amanda looked me straight in the eye and said, "Look, Margaret, there's no room for you here. Every bedroom is taken, the kitchen is busy feeding the whole family, and honestly, your presence would only stir up drama." For a moment, I just froze. She was really throwing me out of my own home, the home I had built brick by brick after my husband died, the place I paid for with endless nights at my sewing machine. And then she kept going, that sly smile never leaving her face. "I already talked with Daniel, and we both agree this house should be used more. It doesn't make sense for it to sit empty while you live comfortably in Denver. We have kids who need room to grow." Her words hit me hard, like stones. 20 years I had poured into that place after losing my husband. 20 years of mortgage payments, every penny coming from clothes I stitched for other people's families. 20 years of caring for every flower, every corner, every detail of what became my sanctuary. "This house is mine, Amanda," I managed to say, though my voice shook more than I wanted. "I have the deed. I pay the bills. That's enough," she cut me off, raising her voice. "You always say it's yours, that you pay. Daniel is your son, isn't he? What belongs to you belongs to him, and what's his is mine. That's how normal families work." The children stopped playing. Everyone turned to stare at me, waiting, judging. Heat rose to my cheeks, humiliation burning like fire. But deep inside, something refused to crack. One of the teenagers, Amanda's niece, I think, walked closer and sneered. "Why don't you just get a hotel? There's no space left here." "All right, sweetheart," I finally said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I understand completely." Amanda's grin widened, convinced she had won. The others looked satisfied, as if they had just witnessed justice. They had no idea what they had woken inside me. I walked back to my car slowly, holding my head high. Driving away to find a hotel, my mind drifted to the past, back when this place was just an empty lot, full of weeds and dreams. I was 50 years old then, Daniel only 25. It had been the two of us against the world, and I made the boldest choice of my life, to build a refuge for our family. That night, I checked into the seaside lodge at $285 a night, money I hadn't planned to spend, because I should have been in my own bed. Instead, I signed in like a tourist, while strangers claimed my home as theirs. Later, sitting on the hotel balcony, I stared at the distant lights of my house. And for the first time in decades, I felt something dangerous brewing inside me. Not the kind of anger that makes you yell and lose control, but a cold, deliberate kind of anger. The kind a woman knows after surviving poverty, widowhood, and decades of sacrifice. Amanda had made her biggest mistake. She had underestimated Margaret Hayes. The next morning, after a restless night, I woke at 6. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda's smug smile, heard her cruel words. I grabbed a quick coffee at the hotel restaurant and decided to head back to the house. Maybe a calmer conversation would fix things. Maybe Daniel would finally show up and put an end to this madness. When I showed up at 8 that morning, I found the front door locked. My own door. I had to ring the bell like some stranger. Michelle, Amanda's sister, opened it, still in her pajamas, frowning at me. "What do you want now?" she muttered, not even bothering with a hello. I told her I just needed to grab a few personal things and talk with Amanda. Her response stunned me. "Amanda's sleeping. And your stuff? It's not here anymore." We packed it up in bags and left it in the garage, so it wouldn't be in the way. My belongings, shoved into bags in the garage like garbage. The words cut through me like a knife. She stepped aside and let me in, but I already felt like an intruder in my own home. The smell was wrong. Greasy food, cigarette smoke, cheap perfume. The living room didn't look like mine anymore. Inflatable mattresses everywhere, clothes piled on chairs, the place completely unrecognizable. When I walked into the kitchen, my heart sank. This was the kitchen I had designed with so much love, picturing family meals and celebrations. Now the stove was caked with burnt grease, the sink was overflowing with dirty dishes that already smelled sour, and my best pans were ruined, covered in black stains. "Where are my porcelain plates?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Oh, some of them broke," Michelle shrugged. "The kids were playing, you know how they are." Anyway, Amanda said they were really old. Old? Those plates weren't just dishes. I had bought them piece by piece over the years, saving carefully until I completed the set. I only brought them out for the most special occasions. And now, they were gone, discarded like trash. I went upstairs to my bedroom, my sanctuary. The door was wide open, and inside was Amanda's mother, calmly organizing clothes in my closet as if it belonged to her. "Excuse me," I said, trying to hold my composure. "This is my room." "Oh, don't worry," she replied cheerfully. "Amanda explained everything. I'll take good care of your things. See? I even put your clothes into these bags so they won't wrinkle. My dresses, my blouses, my shoes, all my personal belongings stuffed into plastic bags, as if meant for donation. And there, in my bed, 2 teenage boys I didn't even know were sleeping soundly. My favorite pillows lay stained on the floor. As I tried to take in this nightmare, my eyes drifted toward the wardrobe. My secret closet, the hidden compartment behind the main wardrobe where I kept documents and treasured things. It was open. Wide open. No one was supposed to know about that space but me. My pulse quickened. I waited until Amanda's mother stepped out of the room, then I rushed to check. My worst fear came true. The space had been ransacked. Papers scattered across the floor. The jewelry I inherited from my mother was gone. The property deed was crumpled like trash. But what froze me in place was something else. Documents that didn't belong to me. Legal papers with Daniel's and Amanda's names on them. My hands shook as I scanned the pages. It was an application to transfer ownership of my house into Daniel's name. The justification? That because of my advanced age and declining mental condition, I was no longer capable of managing valuable property. Declining mental condition. The same woman who had handled her finances with precision for 70 years. The widow who built a fortune from nothing, who still worked, who had kept her independence through sheer will. They wanted to strip me of everything, by declaring me incompetent. And the date on the document? Just last week. This proved it. What was happening wasn't some impulsive takeover. It was a carefully crafted plan to steal my home by twisting the law in their favor. At the bottom of the stack of papers, I found something that froze me. A real estate appraisal. My beach house had been valued at $300,000. And there it was, a handwritten note in Amanda's familiar scrawl. With this money, we can buy a bigger apartment and send the kids to private school. We just need Dee to sign the papers, and for the little old lady not to cause any problems. The little old lady. That's how they talked about me behind my back. I was supposed to stay quiet while they stripped away everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for. I stuffed the papers into my bag. Evidence. This wasn't just an invasion. It was robbery, fraud, conspiracy, and my own son was part of it. As I moved quietly downstairs, I heard Amanda's voice out on the terrace. She was on the phone, speaking loudly, not even trying to hide her words. No, Mom, don't worry. The lawyer says it's easy. Since Daniel's an only child, he can claim the inheritance early because of the mother's incapacity. Once the house is in his name, we can do whatever we want with it. Inheritance in advance. Due to incapacity. They wanted to have me declared mentally unfit, while I was still alive, just so they could take everything. Then I heard the part that made my stomach turn. Yes, we already sent the fake medical papers. Paid that cheap clinic doctor $50 to sign off, saying she has senile dementia. Daniel wasn't sure at first, but I explained it's for the good of the kids. Fake reports. A corrupt doctor. Lies about dementia. And my son, convinced that betraying his own mother was somehow for the benefit of his children. I walked out without saying a word. There was nothing left to discuss. Words had no meaning anymore. This wasn't a family disagreement. It was war. And they had fired the first shot with lies, forged documents, and manipulation. On the drive back to the hotel, my hands shook on the steering wheel. Not with fear, but with resolve. I knew exactly what I had to do. Margaret Hayes would not be a victim. I would become the author of my own justice. Monday morning, I drove straight to the bank. I needed to know exactly what resources I had for this fight. For 20 years, even after paying off the house, I never stopped saving. Every month, I set aside $300 for my pension and from the money I made sewing. I had always believed that savings meant power, security, freedom. Mr. Thompson, the bank manager, had known me for 15 years. A serious man, always respectful of my discipline. Margaret, how can I help you today? He asked with a kind smile. I need the exact balance of all my accounts, I told him, and I also need to discuss a sensitive legal matter. When he pulled up the numbers, for the first time in days, I smiled. $87,000 in savings. $23,000 in certificates of deposit. $12,000 in checking. A total of $122,000. Amanda had been wrong. She thought I was just some poor old lady, living off a meager pension. She had no idea that Margaret Hayes had spent her whole life working tirelessly, saving every penny, preparing for exactly this kind of betrayal. Mr. Thompson, I said firmly, I need you to block any attempts by outsiders to access my accounts. And I'll also need an official letter from the bank confirming that I am fully capable of managing my own finances. He looked at me closely. Of course, Mrs. Hayes. Is there a problem? My family is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, so they can take my assets, I replied, my voice steady. His expression turned serious. That's extremely serious. Do you need a recommendation for a lawyer who specializes in this kind of matter? Yes, please, I answered. He wrote down a name and slid the paper across the desk. Richard Coleman. He's one of the best in family law and property fraud. Tell him I sent you. I left the bank with new energy pulsing through my veins. It wasn't just the relief of knowing I had enough money to defend myself. It was the clarity of finally having a plan. From the parking lot, I called Coleman's office. His secretary scheduled me for that same afternoon. 4 o'clock. The attorney says it sounds urgent. Very urgent, I confirmed. The rest of the morning, I prepared. I organized the fraudulent transfer papers, photos of the damage to my house, lists of stolen items, copies of all my legitimate property deeds. I even printed out screenshots of Michelle's social media posts, where she bragged about her new beach house. At exactly 4 o'clock, I walked into Richard Coleman's elegant office. He was a middle-aged man, his hair graying at the temples, his eyes sharp and intelligent. The kind of man who made you feel safe the moment you sat down. Mrs. Hayes, he said, tell me everything. Start at the beginning, and don't leave out a single detail. So I did. I told him about the invasion, Amanda's humiliations, the fake medical report, the forged documents, the stolen jewelry, and Daniel's betrayal. He wrote carefully, asking pointed questions that showed his experience. Do you have the original property documents? He asked, peering at me over his glasses. Yes. The house is 100% mine. I paid for the construction, and I still have every receipt from the last 20 years. The doctor who supposedly signed this dementia report, has he ever examined you? Never. I wouldn't know him if I passed him on the street. Excellent, he said, leaning back. That's falsification of medical records. A federal crime. And the jewelry? Yes. I have proof. My late husband's watch alone is insured for $3,000. He gave a small, confident smile. Mrs. Hayes, your case is solid. Very solid. We're dealing with illegal invasion, theft, forgery, attempted property fraud, and possibly medical corruption. Your family has gotten themselves into serious trouble. What can we do? I asked. Several things. Tomorrow, we'll file an eviction lawsuit. We'll report the stolen jewelry to the police. We'll file a complaint with the medical board and the district attorney regarding the falsified report. And we'll request a restraining order to stop them from misusing your name any further. How long will this take? In cases like this, he explained, judges act quickly. If we show clear evidence of invasion, eviction can be immediate. And your fee? $5,000, all-inclusive. Can you manage that? I can pay today if you like, I replied. His smile widened. I like clients who take their defense seriously. Mrs. Hayes, your family thought you were a defenseless old woman. They couldn't be more wrong. I met his gaze and answered without hesitation. Counselor, I've been preparing to defend myself against the world for 70 years. I'm not backing down now. Richard Coleman leaned forward, his eyes steady. That's the attitude. But let me ask you one thing. Are you ready to go all the way with this? Because once we start, your relationship with your son may never recover. I fell silent, my mind drifting to Daniel, the boy he once was, the man he could have been, the coward he had become. Finally, I answered. Counselor, my son betrayed me for money. He declared me incompetent for money. He humiliated me publicly, for money. If our bond could be broken so cheaply, then it was never real in the first place. Richard nodded slowly, with respect. Understood. Then we'll proceed with everything. Tomorrow morning, we'll file the full set of actions. There's one more thing, I added, my voice firm. I want them to realize how badly they misjudged me. I want them to learn that betrayal comes with consequences. Legal, yes, but also social. I want their friends, their neighbors, everyone, to know what they did. He gave a half smile. That can be arranged. Court records are public. And believe me, the local press loves cases like this. I left his office with my head high. I wasn't Margaret Hayes, the betrayed mother anymore. I was Margaret Hayes, the woman who was fighting back, with every weapon the law gave me. That night, back at the hotel, I called my sister Susan in Dallas. I told her everything. Margaret, I can't believe Daniel would do that, not after all you sacrificed for him. It doesn't matter what I sacrificed, Susan. What matters is what I'm about to take back. When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring toward my house. From the hotel window, I could see the lights shining, music still blasting, laughter spilling into the night, as if nothing had happened. But tomorrow, everything would change. Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, Richard Coleman pulled up at my house with 3 legal documents, a police officer, and a notary public. I arrived at the same time in a taxi, dressed in my best gray suit, carrying a briefcase stuffed with evidence. Amanda's family was at breakfast on my terrace when they saw the official cars pulling into the driveway. I will never forget the way Amanda's coffee cup slipped from her hand when she spotted the police cruiser's plates. "Good morning," Richard called out in a firm, professional voice. "I am attorney Richard Coleman, legal representative of Mrs. Margaret Hayes, the rightful owner of this property. We are here to deliver an immediate eviction order for illegal occupation." Amanda bolted from the terrace, panic on her face. Michelle appeared right behind her, filming everything on her phone like it was fresh content for social media. Amanda's mother, wearing one of my robes, froze, confused and pale. The officer read the order aloud and began listing the violations. Invasion of private property, destruction of personal property, theft of valuables. As he spoke, I studied their faces. Shock, denial, fear. One by one, they realized this was real, and that their actions had consequences. "You have exactly 2 hours," the officer announced firmly, "to gather your belongings and vacate this property. Anything belonging to Mrs. Hayes stays here. I will personally supervise to ensure you do not remove items that are not yours." 2 hours? Michelle shrieked, her voice cracking. "This is impossible. We have children here." Amanda cried. "You should have thought of that before invading someone else's property," the notary replied calmly, her voice steady and professional. Right then, a car screeched into the driveway. Daniel jumped out, his face pale and desperate. Clearly someone had warned him the police were at the house. "What's going on here?" he gasped. "Your wife and her family are being legally evicted from your mother's property for illegal invasion," Richard Coleman explained coolly. "And you, Mr. Hayes, are being subpoenaed as an accomplice in attempted property fraud." "Property fraud," I said, pulling the papers from my briefcase. "The transfer documents you were about to sign to steal my house, Daniel. The same papers your wife hid in my secret closet." Daniel went white as a sheet. I stared at him, searching for some trace of the boy I had raised, but all I saw was the empty gaze of a stranger, a man who had chosen betrayal over blood. "Mom, I can explain," he stammered. "There's nothing left to explain," I said flatly. "You already made your choice." Amanda came up beside him and whispered something into his ear. He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. "What is your wife telling you, Daniel?" I asked. "Is she telling you to claim I have mental problems? That I'm making things up?" Those words cut me deeper than any insult Amanda had ever hurled. Even now, with the law standing in front of them, with evidence spread across the table, they were still trying to label me as incompetent. "Mr. Daniel Hayes," Richard interrupted, handing him an envelope. "Here is your official subpoena. You have 3 days to appear in family court to answer charges of complicity in attempted property fraud against a senior citizen." "Complicity? But I'm her son. She can't sue her own son." "The law doesn't make exceptions for family when it comes to fraud and theft," the officer said firmly. "A crime is a crime, no matter who commits it." The next 2 hours were pure chaos, a spectacle of humiliation for Amanda's family. From the terrace of my reclaimed home, I stood watching as their carefully planned invasion crumbled in front of them. Amanda's mother broke first. After half an hour of crying and shouting, she collapsed on the stairs and refused to pack another thing. "This is your fault, Amanda," she screamed at her daughter. "You told me everything was handled. You told me the little old lady agreed to all of this. Mom, shut up and help me pack." Amanda snapped, frantically shoving clothes into plastic bags. The children ran through the house sobbing, confused, not understanding why they had to leave the paradise they'd been playing in. A boy of maybe 8 walked up to me, his eyes red and bewildered. "Ma'am, why are you kicking us out? We didn't do anything wrong." My heart cracked a little. The children were innocent, pawns in their parents' scheme. I knelt slightly and spoke softly. "I'm not kicking you out because you did something wrong. I'm asking you to leave because this is my house, and your family came here without my permission. But my mom said it was our house now, he murmured. Your mom was mistaken, I said gently. Amanda overheard and stormed over, her face flushed. Don't talk to my children. You have no right to confuse them even more. I'm not confusing them, I answered evenly. You confused them by bringing them into a house that wasn't yours. This house is ours. Amanda snapped. Daniel is your son. Children inherit from their parents. Children inherit when their parents die, I replied firmly, not when their parents are alive and well. You're already old, she hissed. I straightened my back, my voice calm but steel hard. Old doesn't mean dead. And it certainly doesn't mean weak. What do you even need such a big house for at your age? Amanda sneered. Richard Coleman stepped in immediately, his voice cutting through the air. Ma'am, every remark you make about my client's age is being documented as evidence of age discrimination and psychological abuse against a senior citizen. Amanda's lips snapped shut, her cheeks burning red with rage. Daniel had been silently hauling suitcases to the car, carefully avoiding my eyes. Finally, with only 30 minutes left on the eviction clock, he walked over. Mom, we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, I answered firmly. Look, he said, lowering his voice. I admit things got out of hand. But we can fix this. We can settle it as a family, without lawyers and police. And what kind of agreement do you think we can reach? I asked. You keep the house, of course. We admit it was wrong to move in without asking. And in exchange, you drop the lawsuits and the jewelry. We'll return everything that was taken by mistake. By mistake? My voice sharpened. Do you honestly expect me to believe that stealing my mother's jewelry was a mistake? Mom, it wasn't theft. It was a misunderstanding. Same with the medical report. Same with the transfer request. And calling me a parasite in my own house? I pressed. He fell silent, cornered by the weight of all those betrayals. It wasn't me, he muttered finally. It was Amanda. But you were there, Daniel. You watched as your wife humiliated me in my own home. And you said nothing. I didn't know what to say. You knew exactly what to say, I shot back. You knew you were supposed to defend your mother. But you chose silence, because silence was easier. He grew desperate, flailing for an escape that no longer existed. Fine. Amanda behaved badly. I admit it. What more do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth, I said steadily. I want you to admit that you intended to steal my house using false documents. I want you to admit that you betrayed me. For money. I didn't betray you for money, he cried. I did it for my family. And what am I, Daniel? Am I not your family? Yes, you are, but Amanda and the children are my responsibility now. So your responsibility is to rob your own mother? Daniel pressed his hands to his head in frustration. Mom, you don't understand. We have huge expenses. The kids need private schools, clothes, vacations. Amanda's house needs repairs. I work day and night, but it's never enough. And so you decided I should cover your bills with my life's work? My voice was like stone. You live alone in a small apartment, he said. You don't need a big beach house. It's a waste. There it was. The truth. He hadn't betrayed me out of love for his family. He had betrayed me because he thought I didn't deserve what I had earned. A waste, I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. My 30 years of sewing, saving, scraping by, a waste. My decades of discipline to build this home, a waste. My sacrifice raising you alone after your father died, all of it, a waste. That's enough. Daniel exploded, his voice shaking. It's always the same with you. Always throwing your sacrifices in my face. Always making me feel guilty for wanting my own life. The silence that followed was heavy. Even Amanda stopped stuffing bags to listen. There's the truth, I said, my voice calm and steady. You didn't betray me for money. You betrayed me because my sacrifices became a burden too heavy for you to bear. I never said that, Daniel stammered. You didn't need to say it, I replied. You just screamed it. Daniel stood frozen, breathing hard, his face flushed with shame and anger. You know what the saddest thing about all this is, son? If you had just asked me for help, I would have given it. If you had told me you were drowning in bills, we would have found a way together. But instead, you chose to scheme behind my back, humiliate me in front of strangers, and try to rob me with the law as your weapon. Daniel's voice cracked. Because I knew you'd say no. How could you know that? I pressed. If you never even asked? Because you've always been so attached to your money, he snapped. So controlling with your life's work. Controlling. I almost laughed. Daniel, I paid for your college. I bought your first car. I gave you money for the down payment on your house. I helped you financially more times than I can count. Yes, but always with conditions, he shouted. Always reminding me it was your money, your sacrifice. And in that moment, I finally understood. He hadn't betrayed me out of pure greed. He had betrayed me out of pride. His pride couldn't stand being tied to his mother's help any longer. You know something, Daniel? You're right. I should have forced you to stand on your own 2 feet earlier. I should have let you face your problems without running to me for rescue. But it's too late to rewrite the past. And now you'll get exactly what you wanted. From this day forward, you'll solve all your financial problems without me. Richard Coleman glanced at his watch. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 10 minutes left. That's when the final storm broke. Amanda was screaming orders. The children were crying. Daniel carried the last suitcases with the look of a man already defeated. When they were finally packed into their cars, Amanda rolled down her window and shouted, "This isn't over, you bitter old woman. We'll appeal. We'll prove you're crazy." "Go ahead," I replied coolly. "My lawyer will be waiting." Engines roared, tires kicked up dust, and one by one the cars left my garage. Daniel was the last to go. For a brief second, our eyes met in the rearview mirror. But I had already turned my back on him. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hayes?" Richard asked gently. "Tired," I admitted. "But free. Free from pretending we're a happy family. Free from excusing betrayal with motherly love. Free from pretending forgiveness could ever repair this." The officer bid me goodbye. The notary finished his documents. Richard placed the keys to my house back into my hands. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "your home is officially yours again." I walked slowly up the terrace steps and sat down in my favorite chair. For the first time in a week, I was alone in my own house. But the story wasn't finished yet. That afternoon, I hired a professional cleaning crew. $700 for 5 women who worked all day, scrubbing every corner, washing out every stain, restoring my house to what it once was. While they cleaned, I walked from room to room cataloging the destruction. In the living room, my embroidered cushions were soaked in red wine. In the master bathroom, black hair dye had stained my porcelain tub beyond repair. In the kitchen, 2 of my beloved French skillets were ruined. Out in the garden, half of my flowers and plants had been crushed. But the worst loss wasn't something that could be replaced. My family photo album was gone. The one with Daniel's childhood pictures. The one with me and my late husband. The one with decades of memories, stolen as carelessly as my jewelry. The wall clock my father gave me as a wedding gift was gone too. It wasn't worth much money, but it carried decades of sentimental value. A week after the eviction, the house had finally regained its peace. The strange smells were gone. The stains were gone. My furniture stood once again where it belonged. But I knew deep down that some things would never be the same. Betrayal leaves scars you can't see, scars time never fully heals. That Friday, Richard Coleman called with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Mrs. Hayes, I have some important updates. The doctor who signed the false dementia report has been suspended by the medical board. Turns out, he had written at least 12 of these fraudulent reports in exchange for cash." I sat in silence, letting the weight of that sink in. How many other families had been robbed or nearly robbed because of that man's corruption? And what about Daniel and Amanda? I asked quietly. "That's the best part," Richard replied. "The prosecutor has decided to pursue criminal charges for property fraud and conspiracy. It's no longer just a civil case, it's criminal now." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they could face prison time. And it also means the legal fees they've already paid are piling up.
I didn't feel joy. What I felt was justice.
I never wanted to see my son in jail, but I couldn't allow him to walk free of consequences either. Later that same day, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Michelle, Amanda's sister, sobbing. "Margaret, please, we need to talk."
Amanda's desperate.
"Daniel has already spent more than $15,000 on lawyers, and the trial hasn't even started."
"And what does that have to do with me?" I asked coldly. "We want to apologize. We want to fix things."
"Do you want to fix things?" I asked, "or do you just want me to drop the charges because you're out of money?"
"Please, ma'am.
Amanda has children to take care of. Daniel could lose his job if this becomes public."
"She should have thought of the children before she plotted to rob me," I answered.
"And Daniel should have thought of his job before he signed fake medical reports."
"But you've already got your house back," Michelle pleaded. "Why keep punishing us?"
"Because getting my house back doesn't erase the humiliation.
It doesn't bring back the jewelry.
And it doesn't heal the wound of being betrayed by my own son."
"We can return the jewelry," she blurted. "It's at my mother's house."
"The jewelry you claim was taken by mistake?"
"The jewelry you accidentally stole." "Yes, ma'am, please."
"Tell Amanda," I said firmly, "that if she wants to talk, she can come here herself, and bring every stolen piece with her." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction that their grand plan was crumbling. Sorrow that my bond with Daniel was likely shattered forever. 2 days later, Amanda showed up at my door. She came alone, no Daniel beside her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she carried a bag in her hands.
"Mrs. Hayes, I came to return your things, and to apologize." I let her inside.
She sat down in my living room like a scolded child, placed the bag on the table, and carefully pulled out my jewelry one piece at a time.
"Here are the pearl earrings. Here is the gold watch. Here are the silver coins.
And
here is the necklace that I also took by mistake."
"By mistake," I repeated slowly, letting the sarcasm drip from my voice.
Amanda lowered her head. "The truth is, I took them, but it wasn't to keep them. It was to sell them."
"We needed the money," Amanda admitted, her voice breaking.
"We're drowning in debt.
Daniel lost money in bad investments last year.
We're behind on the mortgage.
Our credit cards are maxed out.
The kids need school." "And that's why you decided to rob me?" I cut in.
For the first time, Amanda began to cry. Not those fake, manipulative tears I had seen before, but real sobs from someone who finally understood the gravity of her actions.
"Mrs. Hayes, I behaved terribly. I know that now. But I was desperate."
"When Daniel reminded me you had this beautiful house that sat empty most of the year,
I thought." "You thought what?"
I interrupted sharply.
"That you could just take it from me without asking?" "No. I never wanted to take it," she stammered.
"I just thought maybe we could use it when you weren't around. And then, when we realized how expensive it was to maintain 2 homes, we thought, maybe it would be simpler if the house were officially in Daniel's name.
To avoid legal problems later." "Legal problems?" I repeated coldly.
"You created the legal problems when you forged medical documents." "That was the idea of that cheap lawyer we hired," she whispered. "He said it was the fastest way to transfer property within a family." I stayed quiet, processing the sheer ignorance. They had destroyed their lives legally and financially because they listened to a corrupt second-rate lawyer.
"Where is Daniel?" I asked. He wouldn't come. He said you're not his mother anymore."
Those words cut deeper than I expected, but they also confirmed my decision had been right. "He says a real mother wouldn't sue her son," Amanda continued softly.
"That you chose money over family."
"And what do you think, Amanda?"
I asked.
I think we started all this mess," she admitted, "but I also think you went too far.
We could have solved it as a family.
Without lawyers, without police."
"How?" I asked firmly.
"How could we solve it as a family when you lied to me, deceived me, and plotted to rob me behind my back?"
"But we're family. Families forgive."
"Families respect each other, Amanda," I said with steel in my voice.
"And you disrespected me in every possible way." She stood up to leave. So there's no way to fix this?
The way to fix this, I told her, was to not do it in the first place. That evening, I sat on my terrace watching the sun sink into the horizon. The waves crashed against the shore, steady and indifferent, as if the sea couldn't care less about human betrayal. A week later, Richard Coleman called with the final update. Mrs. Hayes, Daniel and Amanda accepted a plea bargain. They'll pay a fine of $25,000, each complete 200 hours of community service, and remain on probation for 2 years.
No prison? I asked.
No, Richard replied, but they'll carry permanent criminal records. And the fraudulent medical report has been nullified. Your mental capacity is officially, legally cleared. They've also spent more than $30,000 already on lawyers. Between fines and fees, this fiasco has cost them over $50,000.
$50,000.
Almost half of what I paid when I built the house. They had lost more trying to steal from me than they could have ever gained. A month after the eviction, I did something I had never done before. I hired a part-time housekeeper. Not because I couldn't handle the cleaning, but because I wanted to make sure no one could ever slip into my house again without me knowing. Rosa was a middle-aged woman who lived nearby and needed steady work. She came 3 times a week, keeping the place spotless, but more importantly, keeping it safe. I changed all the locks, installed security cameras, and even updated my will, leaving the house to charities instead of to Daniel. If he wanted financial independence so badly, he would have it. One Sunday afternoon, while moving some things around in the master bedroom, I found an old photo that had slipped behind the dresser. It was Daniel at 8 years old, sitting on the same beach where years later I built this house. His toothless smile lit up the frame, his eyes shining with pure joy. And there I was beside him, younger then, my black hair untouched by gray, my hands on his shoulders, proud as ever.
The sight of it cut deep. I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. How had we ended up here?
How had that sweet boy grown into a man capable of betraying his own mother?
Where had I gone wrong?
Maybe Daniel was right about one thing. Maybe I was too controlling with money, always reminding him of my sacrifices. Maybe I should have balanced better between helping him and letting him learn independence.
But did that excuse betrayal?
Did it excuse falsified medical documents? Did it excuse trying to rob me of everything I had built?
No. Nothing excused that.
Mistakes as parents can explain some things, but they don't erase the responsibility of adult children. Daniel wasn't that 8-year-old boy anymore. He was 45, a grown man, and he had made his choices. Now he had to live with the consequences. I slipped the photo into a drawer. The past would stay in the past. It was time to look forward. 6 months later, a letter arrived. A letter, not a phone call. Daniel didn't even have the courage to face me directly.
Mom, I hope you're well. The kids ask about you. Amanda and I have learned our lesson.
Maybe one day we can be a family again.
I didn't answer.
Real families don't betray each other for money. Real families don't humiliate their elders. Real families don't plan robberies with forged documents. Daniel had decided money mattered more than his mother. I decided my dignity mattered more than empty forgiveness. The following spring, I stayed at the beach house for an entire month, the first long visit since everything happened. My sister Susan joined me for 2 weeks. Together, we planted new flowers in the garden, cooked the meals we'd loved as children, and sat on the porch for hours, watching the sea roll in and out.
Do you miss him?
Susan asked one night over tea.
Every day, I admitted. But I miss the son I thought I had, not the man he became.
Do you think you'll forgive him? She asked softly.
Maybe.
But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it never happened. Forgiveness means accepting the truth and moving forward. And for now, moving forward means keeping my distance. On my 71st birthday, a card came from Michelle. Inside was a photo of the children and a note that they missed me. I was surprised. Of all people, I never expected kindness from her. Maybe she had learned something too. I sent Christmas gifts to the children, but not to Daniel or Amanda. The kids weren't to blame for their parents' choices. They deserved to know their grandmother still loved them, even from a distance. Not long after, I joined a support group for seniors in Denver. There, I learned that my story wasn't unique. Too many others had faced betrayal from the very people who should have been their protectors. Some seniors in my group had lost everything because they didn't have the courage or the resources to fight back. Others, like me, had somehow found the strength to defend what was rightfully theirs. Helen, a kind woman with tired eyes, told me her son sold her house while she was still in the hospital, claiming she would never come home. When she recovered, she had no place to go. Rosa, another woman, explained that her 3 children emptied her bank accounts while she was fighting cancer, leaving her without money for treatment. Hearing their stories made me realize that what happened to me wasn't just some personal family drama. It was part of a larger problem, the disrespect and exploitation of the elderly, often at the hands of their own children. I made a choice. My story would not end with pain. I began giving talks at community centers, speaking about the rights of senior citizens. I shared my experience openly and showed others how to protect themselves legally. I even volunteered for a hotline dedicated to elderly victims of family abuse. And every time I helped someone defend their dignity, the suffering I had endured gained a new meaning. A year after the invasion of my home, Susan told me that Daniel and Amanda had divorced. The financial pressure and the scandal were too much for their marriage. I didn't feel joy, only sorrow. Sorrow for the lives that had been broken by greed and poor choices. Then, one Saturday afternoon, as I watered the flowers in my garden, a car pulled into my driveway. Daniel stepped out, moving slowly, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "Mom," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. I didn't answer. I only looked at him. His face was thinner, new wrinkles carved around his eyes. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. "I came to ask for forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. "Not because I want money or help, but because I finally understand what I did. I betrayed you in the worst way. I let my own mother be humiliated and nearly robbed. I signed false papers. I stayed silent when I should have defended you. There's no excuse." He took a step forward, though he kept his distance. "I don't expect forgiveness now, maybe not ever. I just need you to know I am truly sorry, and that I understand why you did what you did. You were right. You were always right." I looked at him, not the boy I had raised, not even the son who had betrayed me, but a man broken, searching for a way back. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," I finally said. He nodded. Forgiveness takes time, and I could tell he understood my words not as rejection, but as the smallest glimmer of possibility. In the months that followed, I began letting the children visit me. Their laughter filled the rooms again, and for the first time in a long while, my home felt alive. We baked cookies in the kitchen. I told them stories about their father when he was their age. We planted flowers together in the garden. They never mentioned the past. I imagine their parents had told them not to. But sometimes, Emily, the eldest, would watch me with curious eyes, as if she were piecing together fragments of a story she didn't fully know. One Sunday morning, as we planted new tomato seedlings, Emily asked quietly, "Grandma, why did you and Dad fight so badly?" I froze, my hands in the soil, the question hanging heavy in the air. She was only 11, but Emily's eyes carried a wisdom far beyond her years. "Sometimes, sweetheart," I told her gently, "adults make very big mistakes. Your mom and dad made mistakes with me, and those mistakes hurt very deeply." "What kind of mistakes?" she asked. I thought carefully before answering. I didn't want to poison her against her parents, but I couldn't lie either. "They tried to take something that was mine, something very important, without asking." "This house?" she whispered. "Yes." I nodded softly. "This house." Emily kept pressing the earth around a tomato seedling with her little hands, turning the words over in her mind. "Mom says you were cruel to them." "I made them face the consequences of their choices," I explained. "Some people might call that cruelty. I call it justice." She stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "It's like when I take my sister's toys without asking and she tells Mom. I get mad at her for telling, but really, it's my fault for taking them." I smiled, amazed at her simple but profound understanding. "Exactly like that, dear. Exactly like that." That night, after the children had left, I sat alone on my terrace, watching the sun dip into the ocean. 2 years had passed. I thought about the betrayal, the pain, the fight, the victory, and now the slow rebuilding. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.